Welcome, welcome. This is the T.R.I.P Show, the Third Realm Integration Podcast, where our unconscious minds meet and the transformation begins. I am your host, Maegan Kenney, and I am happy to be here. Welcome, 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 welcome. Today I want to talk about heart consciousness. What does that mean? What is heart consciousness? We hear all kinds of things about the heart, compassion. If we look at the research of HeartMath, they have a term called heart coherence. I include that in some of my work. But what does that really mean? What state of consciousness do you have to be in order to have heart consciousness? Well, let's break that down. For the essence of my practice, I call it a heart conscious coaching and consulting program. And the reason why I call it that is because everything that I'm trying to teach along the way is to teach what the essence of, what the quality is of the state of being in heart consciousness. So I'll talk a little bit today about what that is and how we get there. In my experience, it is a state of being in full ego surrender. So we are essentially released from the limitations of the ego, which means we are essentially in a place of stillness, ease. There is a flow to life when we are operating from the state of heart consciousness. There is a sense of harmony and peace within the soul. And we don't have the same drives, the same ego drives, in which we might grab for power. There's no drive to acquire power because we're feeling powerless. There's no drive to feel good enough because we're not feeling valuable. It's the space of non-duality. It's the space where the union of the opposites, which is exactly what our entire life is made up of in our mind and in the world around us. It's the space when those opposites come together and there is a beautiful union. It is allowing or asking or training or guiding the ego to surrender so the fight or flight mechanisms aren't in full swing, which serve a function. Which is why, we have to think about, well, what does it mean to walk around all day in heart consciousness? But I'll get into more of that in a second. We want the fight or flight mechanisms to work, and we want the ego to work when we need it to. But in the world that we live in today, we are all exposed, most of us, probably 99.9%. I'm just throwing that number out there, but I think everybody's operating on high octane. And if you're not operating on high octane, it's probably because you're totally burnt out and exhausted. And you've been exposed to the chronic stress of the high octane lifestyle for too long. Or you've maxed out what you can tolerate. Now, there are people that can operate in high stress situations and actually not be affected by it. But I think the research that has emerged over these many years, frankly, Gabor Mate's work is phenomenal in how he looks at the role that trauma plays in all of our lives. And when I say that word trauma, so many people think of a very specific thing. It's like, as therapists, when we ask people in an intake, like, well, any experience of trauma, any history of trauma? One of the places that I used to work with actually did a research study with all of their patients. And these were highly traumatized individuals that were all struggling, most of them, 99% of them, were struggling with active addiction, homelessness, struggling for resources, very complicated medical issues. And they would be asked, do you have a history of trauma? And people would say no. But when you got into the therapy space, you found out all kinds of things from people's histories, particularly in the study, that absolutely fit the bill for trauma. So Gabor Mate does a wonderful job of explaining the variations of trauma and how even growing up with a parent who is depressed can potentially be a trauma for a particular person. And that trauma is not what happens to us, it's what happens in us when something beyond us harms us and harms our psyche in some way. And then the psyche registers it as trauma. That's why some people can be exposed to certain things and not have a traumatic response. And others, it's a totally different story. So it's being able to sort of look at, okay, where do we need to go in order to find a stillness? And that's directly in through the heart. We are unattached to the results when we are working through the heart space and we are activating our heart consciousness. There is a space of, it is a space of neutrality. There is no good and there is no bad. There just is. There is an appreciation for the fact that we don't know the light if we don't know the dark. And that if you shine a light on anything, guess what you're getting in the background? A shadow. So this is the idea of sort of the balance of the yin-yang, of the masculine energy and the feminine energy. The union of these opposites, the conscious and the unconscious. You make unconscious content conscious when you are in heart consciousness. You are able to see very clearly, feel very clearly what your shadow elements are, what your projections are, the fact that you have projections. We all have projections. We all project. It's being clear about what wounds are getting expressed through the projections. When we are in the heart center and we are in the space of heart consciousness, we have the ability to withdraw our projections. We can release the hooks that have hooked us into having an emotional reaction to something where we have lost the sense of objectivity. We move from a state of personal subjectivity to collective objectivity. Personal being just us, our own personal aspect of our psyche, and collective being the whole system, the whole collective that we're a part of. There's a wisdom inherent in this. And it's like I said earlier, it's a driveless state. So we're not driving. There's no fear that is underneath that drives our behavior. There's no fear that we're not going to be good enough or that someone's going to overpower us or that we're out of control. There's no fear that we can't do this and we can't get this done and we're never going to get here. It's present moment awareness. And there's no drive. We're completely okay with everything exactly the way it is. We are able to consciously experience the value in the path that we are walking for all of its ups and downs. We don't feel wounded here. We're not mad. We're not mad at the world. We're not feeling like there's any injustice being done anywhere because we see the value in all elements. We know that through death and destruction, there is a rebirth, there is a clearing. There is an upgrade of the vibration that has to happen in order for us to meet our highest potential. That goes for our personal experiences and the collective experience at large. And we know that there needs to be a clearing in order to raise that vibration, and that vibration allows us to be at our highest potential. There is an experience of emotional regulation. Everything in life now feels impersonal. Nothing's personal when we're in this space. No matter what, no matter who says what, does what to you, no matter what happens. The world is not out to get you. People are not out to get you. Even if somebody did intentionally and maliciously harm you, you see the way in which it is serving you. So you see the message and the lesson in it, and you are grateful for it. It's the state of unconditional love and compassion. And when I say unconditional love, I mean no conditions on the love that we have for ourselves and others. The heart is open, wide open. And we know that in this space, there's nothing to fear, because as long as we're in the state of heart consciousness, we have enough room to hold all the shit. I mean, all of it. We don't have to worry about this and worry about that, and we just don't, there's no worry. It's what Jung called Coniunctio. It is the space in which there is a psychic balance and equilibrium because the opposites have unified. Coniunctio was a word that came up in Jung's alchemical studies. It's an alchemical symbol of the union of opposites, unlike substances. It's the marrying of the opposites that births a new element. And the new element is the state of heart consciousness, when we can bring together all of the different parts of ourselves, knowing that it's all actually just part of a circle. There is no right and left that pulls us in one direction or the other, and they I think that's a little bit of don't get too hung up in this idea that Jung called it the union of the opposites, because there is no such thing as opposites. If there are opposites, there is a whole. Because if you just keep going, you're going to kind of come back to the beginning. The extreme ends of the spectrum actually end up becoming the same exact thing. And so when you're in this space, you're in a higher state of consciousness. You're in a higher vibration. You have increased the quality of the frequency of your own electromagnetic field. The field of energy that emits from your body and your heart at all parts of the day. And it becomes that this emission becomes stronger. It's actually the theory of social coherence, going back to HeartMath for a second. It's this idea that when you work in their model of establishing heart coherence, you actually have an energetic impact on the people around you. So not only are you healing yourself by establishing this experience of heart consciousness, you're frankly actually healing the people around you without them even knowing it. It's this idea that, for example, when you are honoring your highest self and you say, okay, I'm going to choose to not engage in the energy of that particular thing. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's an actual behavior. And you're going to say, you know what? Like the news. You know what? I'm just not going to turn on that. I know it's on that channel. Not going to turn on that channel today. And so you're going to set a compassionate boundary with yourself or another person to say, I'm not, you know what? That doesn't serve me at this point. Maybe at one point that toxicity served me because I needed to really get more intimately acquainted with that darkness. But it's like, no, been there, done that. I'm good. Gave me what I needed. Don't need to turn on that channel. And so when you take the step back in a relationship, for example, and you start to prioritize the quality of your own experience over what you're contributing to that relationship, you may potentially call that other party in the relationship to now begin to value themselves. And so you're rewriting the unconscious contracts of the way that you showed up in the world, the relationships that you have with your family, the relationships that you have with your boss and your coworkers. Now, don't get it twisted. I mean, when you start to level up, you're now rewriting the rules of the contracts, the unconscious contracts that you previously had with people. So not everybody's going to love this. It's kind of like, when people go for, like when I wrote in my blog about going for ketamine or psychedelic treatments, like, be ready for things to change. And be prepared that as long as it's working, that will happen. But it's all relative. If you find a peace and a stillness with that, then there's no sadness in things changing. If you find bliss in the fact that things are now rewritten for you, then that's beautiful. It's just that a lot of times, let's be real. Healing is really scary. And healing can be really intimidating. And healing is a responsibility, and it's ours and ours only. And sometimes, frankly, we're just not ready to take on that level of responsibility. And that's when Carolyn Mace would say that's why people don't heal. That's the primary reason why people don't heal. Not that they don't want to heal, but it becomes too much to take on. And so when we're in the state of heart consciousness, think about all of the things that hook you and trigger you into being emotionally reactive and then causing you stress and making you upset and making you angry. And now when you're in a negative headspace, the hooks aren't going to go anywhere, people. We are born into this path with very specific wounding patterns. Those patterns don't change. What changes is us. So we release the need to control the outside circumstances or the outcome of any particular situation. We release ourselves from the burden of trying to fix people, or frankly heal people, or change people, or make people better. And so the outside world doesn't change, we do, because when those hooks come in, and they're still going to come in, but now they don't stay. They just move right through, and they move right through. And so when we're able to raise our vibration, and sometimes we'll do it through different things. We don't always have to do it through heart-centering work, although that was the game changer for me, and so it is my staple. It is my biggest asset. It is my inner guide, my heart's wisdom, my heart's intelligence. It is the thing that supports me in everything that I do and allows me to receive support from the people around me. It allows me to go into my own vulnerability with all of the tools that I need to navigate my way through that place. Go deep, 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 deep into my suffering. Walk right on in. This is not the scenic route, people. We're going right in. Through the heart consciousness experience, through working through the heart center, we're getting to the core of the work. We're getting to the core wounding patterns. And it allows us to stay regulated, to stay clear, to stay in a space where, when we're in that vibration, just think about quantum physics for a second. Indulge me for a moment. Those of you who are into the metaphysical world and the metaphysical space and who know what quantum jumping is or what the essence of quantum physics is, you guys are going to know what I'm talking about. But for everybody else, I won't get too technical here, but one of the principles of quantum physics is just about, it is the physics of energy, molecules, vibration. So when there is a low frequency particle that carries a lower frequency, vibrating at a lower resonance, lower frequency particle in the presence of a higher frequency particle, guess which one gets obliterated? The lower frequency particle. The higher frequency particle is the one that takes precedence. It is the one that sort of operates the space. It is the more powerful energy in the room. So that high frequency that's being emitted from that particle will turn the low frequency particle into dust. So think about that image for a second. When you're working with a higher vibration that you get to by accessing your heart's wisdom, your heart's intelligence, and therefore the state of consciousness that your unconditional, loving, and compassionate heart can bring you to, you have raised the vibration of your body. You're operating in a higher frequency. You're now operating in a higher state of consciousness where there's more psychic freedom. Now, you can go higher. You can go higher with different kinds of meditations. You can go higher with maybe psychedelics and plant medicines, although there's definitely room for debate there. Jung would say that the psychedelics are a spiritual bypassing mechanism, so you kind of get to the end. You might have a really blown open experience of consciousness, but you didn't do the work to get there, and neither did your soul. You took the drug, and then boom, you got there. So you took the shortcut. And I said we're not going the scenic route here, but the psychedelic world and the psychedelic space and psychedelic medicine certainly absolutely have its value. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but what I'm saying is that in terms of cultivating the path with your full commitment, when we take a drug to get there, we're actually activating another aspect of a dependency pattern, because now we're depending on the drug to get us there. When you get into a heart-centered state of consciousness, and you're the one that drove the boat, you're the one that can now get off the ride when you want. You're not at the mercy of the drug. And it builds up a skill set that you otherwise wouldn't build up if you just took the quick route using the psychedelics. So I think for me, the overall goal is like maybe we start with the psychedelics so we get a taste of what that higher state of consciousness feels like. But then we got to work that through and make that experience dense. Using the density of the physical body, work that through a somatic experience, an embodied experience to really understand and integrate the full value of that, whatever that experience is. So quantum physics means that when you activate your energy from the heart space into a higher frequency, you now will not get hooked, I guess, drowned in any low frequency stuff. You're vibrating higher at a higher level, so the low vibration stuff doesn't hook into you because it's not a match. And frankly, the higher vibration will flesh out the lower vibration stuff. So people that are around you that carry a lower vibration in the form of negativity or judgment or criticism, they'll move right on out of the orbit. And anything that's in you that's carrying that lower frequency will start to transmute. The negative thoughts will start to relieve. The negative feelings will start to relieve. It's kind of like how if you go for sound healing, like I'm going to this place in a few weeks, it's this like chamber called the harmonic egg, and you're in this like egg-shaped dome in which you are, I believe it's music playing at a certain frequency, or there's some way that this machine emits a higher frequency that then gets you into a higher frequency. You'll get really sick if you drink alcohol when you leave that place, because alcohol is a low vibrational particle. It carries a low vibration. Just think about it. When does drinking ever improve somebody's life? So just think about it from a behavioral and a psychological level. Well, that's because it's a low frequency particle. It's like heroin, opiates. I always call those perspective constricting or consciousness constricting drugs. You go real small as opposed to real big. You see so much less as opposed to seeing more. The same goes for a lot of psychiatric drugs. The reason why they work is because they make it so much smaller. They take the noise down. They bring the focus in. It's like, looking through a paper towel freaking roll. It's like that little cardboard thing where you talk through it and you're like, burr, 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 burr. I mean, like, it's very constrictive. It just goes real narrow. That's why a lot of psychiatric meds work, because they dampen everything down. They take it down. But if we're trying to expand our consciousness, well, we're doing the opposite now. Because expanding the consciousness in the beginning, you're actually going to feel more, even though we're not really talking about feelings here. We're talking about vibration and frequency. But in response, you are going to feel more, especially when I do the wounding meditations with people. The suffering integration, where we're actually holding the suffering and we're getting as close to it as we can with the protection of the heart's wisdom. We're starting in the heart first. But in the beginning, that brings up some emotions. A lot of people cry in those meditations. And if you're afraid to feel, or if you're on meds that really prevent you from feeling, well, you got to think about whether or not that type of meditation, and that's the meditation that I do, which is why it's important for me to make sure that whoever I do that with is in a place where that's going to be beneficial for them. Got to think about whether or not that serves your highest good right now. And let's face it, the primary underlying reason for all mental health issues is a pattern of avoidance. Avoidance of fear, avoidance of feeling pain, and avoidance of feeling intense emotions. We have intense emotions, and now we want to avoid feeling them, so then we take something to dampen it. And so, in the beginning of this process, even just activating the heart center and coming into the space of heart coherence, you're going to move that energy out, and it might come out in the form of tears. Tears is one of the most effective ways to release energy and to release it from the body, releasing what no longer serves you. Sweat is another one. Breath is another one. And so just thinking about what it means to have this expanded state of consciousness. Our heart is what got us there. We're opening up. The skies are opening. We're shattering our own illusions. We're seeing things really clearly. And we need to be prepared for things to start to change once that happens. That's the essence of heart consciousness. It's all the good things. I mean, even if you look at the research from HeartMath, and they talk about their heart coherence, which I use some of their stuff, but I really just build onto it a little bit more. And I'm building onto it even more with Third Realm, because the Third Realm method is working through the heart center and establishing that heart consciousness, but actually now opening up your heart to the patterns that are in your birth chart. So it's the combination of the heart consciousness meditations with astrology and working with the astrological archetypes, or the planets that are present in your birth chart, which is considered your personal symbol or mandala, which is the image that represents all of you and the soul assignment that you were given before you incarnated here in human form. So I'll go into that a little bit more in further episodes around the role that astrology plays, Jung's deep relationship with astrology, what astrology is, because I do not use it as a predictive tool or a fortune-telling method or a way to make people feel at the mercy or the will of fate or destiny, as if they cannot change the outcome of events. It's actually the exact opposite of how I use it. But the goal is that I'm combining the meditation with the elements of astrology. And the meditation is all about establishing this heart consciousness. Because when we're in the state of being heart conscious, we can do anything. We can do whatever we want. And we don't have, again, deep emotional pulls to one side or the other. There's a real stillness. And it's interesting because when you start doing this work further and further and further, you actually start to realize the things that you do in life, even the things that are productive, like going to the gym or accomplishing that goal, whatever it is, like getting a job or getting that paper done or getting that assignment done, you actually start to realize how many of your behaviors stem from drives that are an extension of the wounds. So being awesome at the job, you might start to see that stems from a wound of not being good enough. Killing it at the gym and making exercise your priority, you potentially could start to see that the only reason why you did that was because of fear of judgment from other people. So you always kept that standard up. The drive to cram last minute and finish a paper, well, that actually comes from the anxiety drive. And the anxiety being the motivating factor. The anxiety being the energy that helps you get things done. But if you could snap your fingers, close your eyes, and say, if I didn't need money, if I didn't need validation from other people, if I didn't need power and control, what would I be doing? And I guarantee you your life would look vastly different than it does now. For most of us. That's an amazing, beautiful place to be. The life that we live, for the most part, the world that we live in is not conducive to that. Which is why, as a collective, we have to start figuring out how to take care of ourselves and how to start changing things if we want a society and a collective and a system and a structure that is more conducive to peace and stillness. There is no reason why we can't strike that balance. Again, back to this equilibrium. We can find it in our collective. We have horrifically incompetent leaders leading us to this point. We have for a long time. Gabor Mate did an episode on Russell Brand's podcast a couple years ago and named many examples of sick leaders that we have because they are totally ego-driven people. And how politics is just a dirty business and it's a dirty game. And that we really cannot trust a lot of our world leaders right now to be in the heart space. Because who's talking about this? Who's doing this? Huh? Who's doing it? So that's what I'm talking about here. And then here's the thing. Not everybody can build their life. If we can't change the outside, well, we got to change the inside, right? Not that I'm saying we have to change the outside as the motivating factor is we change the outside because we have to, otherwise we're not going to be okay. No, the outside can actually still be a mess as long as we're working on ourselves. But when we work on ourselves, we will project out that same peace and stillness. And then there's reciprocity back and forth where we're not in constant conflict with our outer world. But let's say like that day doesn't come for a while and we're still stuck in a place of chaos. There's really not a whole lot of movement right here, right now. Can we find the peace and stillness within? Sure, we absolutely can. And we make that process easier when we can begin to take charge of our own lives, set boundaries, say no, prioritize the value of our own experiences, leave the job that's not serving us. If we're in a constant state of anxiety and stress, find a new way. Allow your options to present themselves to you by having an open mind. Have an open heart and an open mind, and you will find the solutions. You'll find a new way through. Work with the ego. Train the ego to surrender when you need it and bring it back online when you need it. This is all about ego development. It's all about taking that part of the psyche, which is the personality, which is the ego, and working with it. Another thing, too, that I'll just leave with is pay attention to when and where you manipulate in your life. Now, in the world of therapy, I've worked with supervisors in the past when I was just starting to get into the world of depth psychology, and I was working with clinical psychologists. You say the word manipulation, and it's like the dirty word you're not supposed to say. Like, how dare you suggest that people manipulate? It's like, well, what kind of illusion have you constructed for yourself in which it's even painful to call out the truth? Because we all manipulate as human beings. There's no stigma attached to that unless you want to assign it. That says more about you than it does me. I'm just talking about the facts here. We all have a shadow. Every ounce of everything we're involved in has a shadow, and it also has a light. There's a light side and a shadow side to all of it. To deny the shadow and to deny the light means you're denying the truth. And so when I say think about where you manipulate, think about where you're grabbing for power, and think about where you're grabbing for validation. Because both come out of, one, the place of feeling powerless, and two, not feeling good enough, not having any value. And so as a result, what do? We manipulate in order to feed that egoic need. So pay attention. Where do I manipulate? Where do I manipulate? Oh, I just did that thing, and that didn't feel great because really I was feeling so powerless in that moment that I exaggerated that story, or I played myself up to be kind of more important than I really was, or exaggerated my accomplishment in some sort of way because I wasn't feeling good enough. I was feeling inferior. Or I struck out at that person because I was trying to take them down off their own power because I was feeling powerless in the presence of them. Or I'm trying to control a particular situation. I'm trying to control an outcome, so as a result, I did this. Just pay attention to where you manipulate yourself and manipulate others, and then start asking yourself, all right, where are my projections? What am I projecting? And I'll go into more of the specifics around what projections are, what archetypes are, what the collective unconscious or the unconscious mind is. But for the sake of today, let's just stay here. And that's all I got, so let's leave it here. The essence of heart consciousness, where we're not pulled in any direction. We're fully, fully, fully at peace with the stillness within. We're not trying so hard. It's actually the state of inaction. And we allow that to move us. So we come to the place of inaction by releasing our attachments to all of the things that we feel like we have to do and control. And then from there, we allow our heart's wisdom to guide the way. And that's how we move. So now you're on a different track. Higher vibration, higher frequency. That's it. I'll leave it there. May the light always lead your way. well, everybody. The Third Realm Integration Podcast and related content is intended to provide information and/or entertainment only and is not a substitute for mental health or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Do not delay mental health or medical consultation or substitute a mental health or medical professional's opinion because of what you heard on this show. Seek the advice of your physician or another qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health or medical condition. The host of this podcast does not provide emergency support for mental health or medical issues. For questions or concerns, visit your local emergency room or contact your doctor.